Welcome to Kunzy Podcast English. Party Popper. Today we will dive into a dramatic and intriguing story. A showdown between two powerful forces, Harvard and the U government. This story is not just a debate about power, but also a profound lesson on academic freedom and the relationship between the government and educational institutions. The main topic today is, Harvard loses $2.3 billion. Will it challenge the U government? We will explore the tense situations, difficult decisions, and the far-reaching impact this story has. Let's tune in and discover more. Part 1. Introduction. Harvard. A name that is not only synonymous with prestige but also a symbol of intellect and innovation. It is one of the oldest and most renowned universities in the United States, having produced countless leaders, scientists, and influential figures throughout history. With a solid foundation in research and education, Harvard has continually contributed to the development of society. However, recently, this esteemed institution has found itself in the midst of a major crisis, as its conflict with the U government seems to grow deeper. At the heart of the issue are fundamental matters such as free speech, fairness, and equality in education. The consequence of this disagreement is the U government's decision to cut a massive funding grant, significantly impacting Harvard's operations. Will this mark an important turning point? Or is it just a challenge that this university will overcome? Let's explore the developments of this ongoing dispute. Part 2. Demands from the government. During President Donald Trump's administration, the U government made a series of tough and impactful demands on Harvard University, compelling the school to reconsider its values and operations. Below are the key demands that the government placed on the university. Combating anti-Semitism. One of the key demands from the government was for Harvard to take a stronger stance against anti-Semitism. The government requested that the university not only publicly oppose it, but also implement specific measures to prevent and eliminate any acts of discrimination, especially those targeting the Jewish community. The government argued that Harvard needed to take proactive and more robust actions to prevent and address discriminatory behavior, ensuring there was no space for prejudiced views in the academic environment. Eliminating DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The government demanded that Harvard eliminate its DEI programs, which focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in admissions and teaching. These programs have been in place for years at Harvard to promote fairness and create an inclusive learning environment for all ethnicities, genders, and minority groups. However, the government argued that these programs place too much emphasis on social factors, creating unfair divisions between student groups. Banning students from wearing masks during protests. Another notable demand was to ban students from wearing masks while participating in protests. The government reasoned that wearing masks could make it difficult to identify individuals and control situations, potentially creating security risks. This seemed to contradict students' rights to free expression and participation in political activities, a fundamental right protected by the U Constitution. Punishing students who participate in protests. Another requirement from the government was that Harvard must enforce punishment on students who participate in protests deemed disruptive to public order or opposing government policies. The government suggested harsh penalties for students involved in protests that could lead to conflict or violate laws. This created tension between the freedom of speech and the need to maintain order. Changing the admissions system and organizational structure. The U government also demanded that Harvard change its admissions system and organizational structure to reduce the emphasis on certain social, ethnic, or gender groups. This included altering the admissions policies to diminish the influence of diversity factors or extracurricular involvement, and instead, focusing more heavily on academic achievements. The goal was to make the admissions process fairer and less reliant on social or cultural background. If these demands were implemented, they would not only alter the policies and operations of Harvard, but also have a far-reaching impact on the entire U educational system. Faced with these directives, Harvard had to decide whether to remain steadfast in its core values or comply with the government's demands, potentially leading to significant changes in the academic environment. Part 3. Harvard says no. In a controversial and surprising move, Harvard University rejected all the demands made by the U government under President Donald Trump. These demands not only touched on core educational issues, but also involved fundamental principles regarding freedom of speech and academic autonomy. Despite facing immense pressure, Harvard remained firm in its stance, which sparked a significant debate across American society. Why did Harvard say no? Protecting freedom of speech. Every university plays an important role in creating a space for free expression of opinions and differing viewpoints. Harvard believes that protecting freedom of speech is one of the most critical factors in maintaining an academic environment. The university argues that regardless of how controversial or uncomfortable a viewpoint may be, it should be allowed to be expressed in an academic space. Harvard fears that excessive governmental intervention in these matters would undermine one of the foundational principles of higher education, the freedom to exchange ideas and seek the truth. Therefore, protecting freedom of speech is not just a matter for the university, but for society as a whole, where every individual has the right to express their thoughts without fear of punishment. Maintaining autonomy in governance and academia. One of the key reasons Harvard rejected the government's demands was to protect its academic autonomy. The university asserts that independence in making decisions regarding education, research, and student life is what contributes to the success of an educational institution. Harvard fears that if the government interferes in the admissions process, academic programs, or decisions related to student life, it would weaken its self-governance and harm the quality of education. For example, the demand to eliminate DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs could limit opportunities for disadvantaged student groups, which contradicts the university's commitment to building a diverse and inclusive academic community. Government overreach. Another reason Harvard firmly said no is that the university believed these demands exceeded the scope of authority granted to the government under the law. According to Harvard, the government has no right to intervene deeply in the university's decisions, especially when these demands are not based on clear legal principles. Harvard argues that demands, such as banning students from wearing masks during protests or punishing students participating in protests, violate individual freedoms and are inconsistent with constitutional provisions and existing laws. If the university had to comply with these demands, there would be no space for students and faculty to think and act according to their beliefs. Harvard's no is a strong statement. Harvard's decision was not just a response to government interference, but also a bold statement about its commitment to protecting freedom of speech and academic autonomy. The university didn't just defend its own interests but raised a larger question. Can we trade academic freedom and freedom of speech for government intervention? Harvard chose to protect these values, and its decision to say no sent a clear message. Academic freedom cannot be compromised. Harvard's decision highlighted the relationship between higher education and political power, sparking a wide debate about the role of universities in defending democratic values and individual freedoms. Despite the challenges and difficulties, Harvard stood firm on the principles it has always upheld, continuing to assert its place in the history of American education. Part 4. The government cuts funding. When the U.S. government, under President Donald Trump's leadership, was unable to convince Harvard to accept its demands, they decided to take a dramatic and high-stakes action, cutting a staggering $2.3 billion in funding to the university. This is no small amount. Of the $2.3 billion, $2 billion was allocated to Harvard's research fund. This money was used to finance thousands of groundbreaking research projects across science, technology, medicine, and the humanities, helping the university maintain its top position in academic fields. These studies could lead to life-changing innovations, from new medical treatments to revolutionary technological advancements. Losing this money is not just a financial loss, it's a devastating blow. A multitude of ongoing research projects will have to stop, or even be completely canceled. Scientists, professors, and students working on these critical projects will face the loss of their jobs, research, and the potential to make a difference in the world. But it doesn't stop there. Another $60 million was cut from service contracts that Harvard had with partners and collaborators. These contracts play a crucial role in supporting research activities and developing new initiatives, including partnerships with other companies and organizations. When these funds were cut, not only were collaborative programs affected, but it also caused Harvard to lose important opportunities for connections with other research institutions. The financial cuts have a far-reaching impact, extending beyond the loss of a significant amount of money. They directly affect thousands of students, graduate researchers, and faculty members at Harvard. Academic programs, which have become models for universities around the world, now face reductions or delays. Students no longer have the same level of financial support as before. Scholarships, an essential motivator for many students from disadvantaged backgrounds, have been severely affected. These students may be forced to abandon their studies or find alternative funding sources to continue their education. Moreover, Harvard has always prided itself on its independence and autonomy in managing the university and making academic decisions. However, this funding cut by the government raises a significant question. Can the university continue to maintain its autonomy in academic decisions when faced with such powerful political pressure? This is not just a simple standoff between the government and a prestigious university. It's a larger battle over power in education, freedom of speech, and the ability to uphold fundamental principles in research and teaching. Harvard, a symbol of intellect and academia, is now facing its biggest challenge in history: how to stand firm while under immense pressure from the government. This battle doesn't only impact Harvard. It raises a broader issue for the entire education system. Can universities continue to preserve their independence and respect for academic freedom when the government can intervene so deeply in their finances? Part 5. The government's reason for acting. The government made the decision to cut a large funding allocation to Harvard, citing the university's failure to comply with civil rights laws. The administration argued that Harvard, with its prestigious reputation and influence, acted as if it had special privileges, meaning it didn't need to follow the same rules as other institutions. The government believed that the university had exceeded the limits set by public policies and laws that apply to other educational organizations. Specifically, the government claimed that Harvard failed to implement policies that protect equality and fairness within its academic environment. This could include issues like the way the university conducted its educational programs and admissions processes, not aligning with standards regarding the rights of all students, regardless of their race, religion, or background. The government particularly emphasized that Harvard must adhere to strict civil rights regulations, ensuring that all individuals are treated equally and fairly. From the government's perspective, Harvard had allowed its policies and actions to go beyond the boundaries of the law, ignoring the standards and regulations that public institutions are expected to follow. This behavior not only impacted the students at the university, but also had a wider effect on the community, prompting the government to worry about setting a negative precedent. To force Harvard to change and comply with these regulations, the government decided to cut a massive funding allocation of $2.3 billion. This was not merely a financial punishment, but also a strategy to put pressure on the university. Losing this funding, Harvard would face severe financial consequences, affecting its research programs, scholarships, and other crucial projects. The funding cut was a bold move aimed at sending a clear message to Harvard. No matter how prestigious a university is, it cannot operate outside the law. The government wanted to demonstrate that even globally renowned educational institutions must be held accountable and follow the same rules as other organizations. They cannot act outside the law without facing consequences. The government viewed this action as a way to protect and uphold the core values of democracy, fairness, and the rights of citizens. This funding cut wasn't just a specific penalty for Harvard, but also a warning to all other universities and educational institutions nationwide. If they fail to comply with regulations regarding fairness, inclusion, and the rights of all citizens, they will face severe repercussions. Part 6. Why Harvard said no. Harvard firmly rejected the government's demands because the university wanted to maintain its autonomy in all academic and administrative matters. The university argued that if it complied with the government's requests, it would lose the core values it has always upheld, especially academic freedom, a crucial element for research and education at Harvard. Academic freedom is not just a right, but a fundamental principle that ensures research, teaching, and academic decisions remain unaffected by political influences or external pressures. Harvard believes that the government should not interfere in the university's academic processes, because doing so would set a dangerous precedent, leading to other universities potentially losing their autonomy and freedom in academic affairs. Additionally, Harvard emphasized that existing laws, such as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, are already sufficient to protect individuals and organizations from discrimination without requiring such deep governmental intervention in the university's internal matters. According to the university, these government demands not only violate academic freedom, but also contradict established legal principles within the current legal framework. Harvard argued that the government does not have the authority to intervene in these matters, because such interference would undermine the independence and autonomy of educational institutions, which are the foundation of intellectual and societal growth. The university is not only defending its own rights, but also protecting the rights of other educational institutions, helping maintain a free, creative academic environment that is not influenced by external forces. Thus, Harvard decided to say no to the government, asserting its right to make independent academic decisions, and affirming that academic freedom is a value that cannot be compromised. Part 7. Impact on students and other universities. The situation at Harvard left its students in a state of confusion and uncertainty. Many were concerned about the possibility of losing their scholarships and the disruption of their research projects. Harvard students, who are typically some of the brightest minds in the country, found themselves caught in the crossfire of a larger political and legal battle. For them, this wasn't just a matter of academic autonomy. It was about the very future of their education, their careers, and the opportunities that the prestigious institution had promised them. But this crisis didn't stop at Harvard. The ripple effects of the government's actions were felt across other Ivy League schools as well, including the University of Pennsylvania, Brown University, and Princeton University. These institutions, which are similarly renowned for their academic excellence in research, found themselves under increasing pressure from the government. Like Harvard, these universities had long held their independence in high regard, and had built their reputations on the principles of academic freedom and autonomy. As the government extended its scrutiny, these other schools faced the same dilemma: to comply with demands that might compromise their integrity or to stand firm, risking the loss of valuable funding. The pressure created an atmosphere of fear and tension throughout the academic community, where institutions that had once been bastions of free thought now found themselves grappling with political forces threatening their independence. For the students at these universities, the situation was even more complex. Their academic futures were now intertwined with a battle over political power, legal rights, and the values that the educational system was built upon. The risk of losing financial support and the potential disruptions to their studies created a climate of anxiety, leaving students wondering whether their hard-earned opportunities would be jeopardized by a dispute far beyond their control. Ultimately, what started as a singular conflict with Harvard grew into a larger issue that touched the core of higher education in America. The students and faculty at these institutions found themselves on the front lines of a battle for the future of academic freedom, where the stakes were no longer just about Harvard, but about the very essence of what it means to pursue knowledge in an environment free from external interference. Part 8. The significance of the story between Harvard and the U. Government is not merely a conflict between two parties. It is a profound lesson about the complex relationship between state power and the autonomy of educational institutions. It serves as a prime example of the ongoing struggle between government intervention and the self-governance of universities, institutions that are meant to foster freedom of thought and creativity. The government, in its role as protector of national interests, asserts that universities receiving public funding must comply with the regulations and laws set by the state. They argue that public funding is a significant privilege, and if universities wish to continue receiving this support, they must accept the accompanying demands and conditions, regardless of how these affect the operations of the institutions. On the other hand, Harvard, as one of the world's leading educational institutions, is firmly committed to protecting its academic freedom and self-governance. The university cannot accept deep government intervention in its teaching, research, and management processes. Losing this autonomy would, according to Harvard, undermine its ability to maintain the quality of education for which it is known. Thus, this story is not only a legal confrontation, but also a crucial reminder for the entire higher education system. It raises questions about how to strike a balance between governmental authority, the responsibility of educational institutions, and freedom in the dissemination of knowledge. Should the government have the right to intervene too deeply in the activities of universities? Or should universities, with their mission of educating and shaping future generations, retain the right to determine their own operations? This is the question this story poses, compelling each of us to reflect on how to build an educational system that protects national interests while preserving academic freedom and creativity. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Kunzy Podcast English. We hope you found this story as compelling and thought-provoking as we did. The struggle between Harvard and the U government is a powerful reminder of the importance of academic freedom and the delicate balance between power and responsibility. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more engaging discussions. Your support helps us grow and bring more fascinating stories to light. Stay tuned for the next episode. And remember, keep learning, keep growing. See you next time.